In our age of satellites, cell phones, and cyberspace, there are still a few hidden places left on Earth. One of them is Irian Jaya. A land born of fire, crowned by ice, where pathless jungles swelter in equatorial heat, where freezing mists envelop soaring mountains, and men still live untouched by time. Some 75 miles from its jungle shores, a wall of mountains soars to 16,000 feet, the highest peaks between the Andes and the Himalayas. Atop them gleams a natural wonder, magnificent glaciers spawned by the Ice Age some 15,000 years ago, only 5 degrees south of the equator. Just below these glaciers lies a wonder of man. 2 gigantic mines called Grasberg and Ertsberg, less than 2 miles apart and nearly 14,000 feet high. Before it's exhausted, this megamine may yield more gold than the entire California gold rush. Many call it the most spectacular mineral deposit ever found.
It's a mountain of ore, but it's not just that, it's also a root of ore. So like if you had a tooth, you know, and you can see the part that sticks above the gum, that's what most people mine. But if you extracted that tooth and it's got that long root on it, we've got that as well, and it's also full of ore. So you're looking at a vertical mile of gold ore body. It's just incredible.
Grasberg and Ertsberg lie some 700 miles north of Australia and 2,000 miles east of Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, in the western half of New Guinea, second largest island in the world. Once a Dutch colony, Irian Jaya is now an Indonesian province and home of some of the world's richest deposits of copper and gold. But Irian Jaya is not surrendering its treasures without a fight. The Grasberg-Ertsberg mining complex took 20 years to build, cost more than $3 billion, and took its toll in human life. At its dizzying altitudes, men must work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to make mining profitable in one of the most remote locations on Earth.
The tough part about this is that Mother Nature implanted this wonderful ore body at 13,000 feet. When she said, come get it, and we had to go get it.
When you go up there to try to explain it to somebody, the best way is that you're going to walk away with your mouth open. You're going to be agog. People are going to say, how in the world did you do that?
This incredible story begins with one man, a Dutch geologist named Jean-Jacques Dozy. In 1993, aged 84, he returned to visit the mine his courage made possible. In 1936, 27-year-old Dozy vowed to be the first man to reach Irian Jaya's tropical glaciers. It seemed a reckless boast. Europeans had been launching expeditions to Irian Jaya's hinterland for 300 years. None had broken through the deadly labyrinth of jungle between the mountains and the sea.
The only way to make your way inland is by river. Now, the problem with the rivers is that you don't know where the rivers are leading. This was a problem with the very first expeditions that came to this area that tried to reach the glaciers that took the wrong river. They spent a year and a half trying to get to the glacier just because they took the wrong river.
It seemed unlikely that Dozy would succeed where so many others had failed. But Dozy possessed a recent 20th century invention, which lifted him over the jungle and showed him the way to go.
Dozy had the advantage of knowing what the terrain looked like from the air. Once you knew the terrain, once you knew which river to take, once you knew what the lay of the land fairly well, you could move a lot faster.
On October 29, 1936, Dozy, 2 friends, and 8 porters started up the Iqua River. They paddled to where the mountains began and started walking.
We just walked up as far as we could, started cutting, followed the trail, made a trail, and the higher we came, the more tougher it became.
After a while, they didn't know where they were anymore because they had aerial photographs up to a point, but then the jungle gets pretty steep and you're not quite sure how far you have to go.
Exhausted as he was, the geologist Dozy took time to sketch a peculiar rock formation.
You had a black rock wall, a black mountain with green and blue large specks on it. And well, being a geologist, I of course recognized that there should be some copper into that rock, but at that moment I had to go on.
Dozy had no way of knowing how right he was. In fact, he had stumbled upon one of the greatest geological discoveries of all time. On his field maps, he named it Ertsberg, Dutch for Mountain of Ore. Back in Holland, he wrote a report describing his discovery. But his timing could not have been worse. Dozy published his report in the summer of 1939. On September 3rd, World War II began. While Holland suffered under Nazi occupation, the Ertsberg report gathered dust. 20 years later, a Dutch geologist gave it to Forbes Wilson. Wilson was chief mining engineer for Freeport, an American mining company.
Forbes was a man who had to be the best or the biggest or the fastest or the smartest with anything and everything. And indeed he was in many areas. That's part of the reason I think that we today are mining in the Ertsberg complex.
Wilson was looking for nickel deposits, but when he read Dozy's description of the Ertsberg, he forgot all about nickel.
After Forbes Wilson read the Dozy report and it became part of his being, we can almost say that it became a holy grail for him. He was a man, 50 years old at the time, and a heavy smoker. He gave up smoking, got himself in shape, and organized this expedition. He had to find and see for himself Ertsberg.
On May 30th, 1960, Forbes Wilson plunged into the jungle, determined to reach the Ertsberg. He asked his friend and fellow geologist Delos Flint to come along. Flint jumped at the chance to take part in the adventure of a lifetime, despite the perils of trekking through Irian Jaya. On June 16, 1960, after 18 days of hard travel, Del Flint and Forbes Wilson found the Ertsberg. A surface inspection convinced them that it was indeed a mineralogical marvel, thickly laced with enormous chunks of the yellow copper ore known as chalcopyrite.
There'd be blobs that up to 4 feet across, or perhaps even longer, that were solid chalcopyrite. And when you saw that, it was just, you boggled your mind. When I first got there and got up on the thing, I just screamed like Tarzan, "Yoo-hoo, God, it's mine, all mine!"
The 2 American geologists had proved that Ertsberg was really a mountain of ore. But Jean-Jacques Dozy had called it a mountain of ore on the moon. Who could build a mine in one of the most inaccessible places on Earth? In the 1960s, Irian Jaya's mountain of copper and gold appeared as spectacular as Forbes Wilson believed it would be. Rock samples from Ertsberg had one of the highest copper contents ever found. Yet no matter how rich it was, Ertsberg was virtually impossible to reach. But on April 5, 1967, with authorization from the Indonesian government, Freeport decided to try. To build its mine, Freeport hired Bechtel, a California engineering firm with a reputation for building things in places no one else could. But even Bechtel's engineers were stunned by Irian Jaya. To even reach Ertsberg, engineers would have to build a 75-mile road through some of the toughest terrain on Earth. First, through the labyrinth of mangrove swamps hugging the coast. Then, through the seemingly impenetrable jungles of the lowlands. And finally, over mountains that rose like walls up to 16,000 feet high. They had no airport, no seaport, and no place for helicopters to land. As crews cleared helicopter landing sites, road building began. Workers came from all over the world to take on the incredible challenge. Among them was a young Indonesian from Sumatra named Ilyas Hamid.
When I was selected to come here, I was a little bit afraid because I heard there were almost no people in this place, and also some rumors that people in this area ate other human beings. However, when I shared my concern with my family, they gave me their support and told me to leave my fate to God.
Engineers dredged tons of gravel from riverbeds, trying to create the foundation of a road. In the worst places, it took as much as 50 cubic yards of gravel to build 1 foot of road. Overnight, while the road builders slept, the road they had built the day before often sank into the swamp. In places, Bechtel built 2 miles of road for every mile that survived.
Working in this place was very difficult. I thought that after digging mud for 3 to 6 feet, I would get to hard soil. But in fact, we were still finding mud after we had dug more than 30 feet. In one day, we could make only 15 to 20 feet of road.
As the road inched forward, landslides buried tractors. Trucks fell into rivers. Helicopters sank into swamps. And that was the easy part. 50 miles from the coast, the sheer wall of Irian's backbone rose up as steep as 70 degrees. The mountaintops were razor-sharp ridges, in places only 2 feet wide, with vertical drops on either side. Yet 25 miles of road had to be built over those mountains if Ertsberg was to be reached.
If you're willing to put enough S-curves into the road, you can put a road up almost any slope. Then the problem is to put the road along the ridgecrest. Now what Bechtel did is from helicopters, they dropped down very small bulldozers that are the size of small lawnmowers. They would drop these down, and these bulldozers would cut off the top part of the ridgeback. And then slightly larger bulldozers would come in. Bechtel went through 6 size bulldozers between these very small lawnmower-type bulldozers until they got to the big boys the size of a house, which eventually did build the road. So you started getting a flat ridge line, and then you started going down in S-curves, going down to the bottom. Tremendously difficult. Bulldozers would fall over the edge. Who knows where they ended up?
The bulldozers pushed forward. Drivers kept one eye on the dizzying drops below them, and the other on the crumbling cliffs above. No one knew if he would live or die.
One day, my bulldozer broke down, and the helicopter could not bring a spare part. The next morning, my friend, an American whose bulldozer was working, replaced me as the leader of the work. After only half an hour, the land he was working on collapsed, and his bulldozer slid down into a canyon. As he fell, a tree branch speared him right through the chest and killed him.
By 1971, after nearly 4 years, victory seemed in sight. But 7 miles short of Ertsberg, the road builders ran into a towering 2,000-foot cliff. Bechtel's engineers had an ingenious solution. A helicopter carried a 9,000-foot-long nylon rope to a platform at the future mine. With this bolted in place, workers hoisted up ever thicker ropes until the line was strong enough to hold steel cables as thick as a man's arm. This web of steel became the longest aerial tramway of its day and one of the steepest. Its cars rose 2,000 feet in less than a mile. But no one anticipated the mysterious vibrations that shook its cables.
Vibrations would be so strong they had to stop everything because the ore cars would vibrate right off the cable. They called in a Swiss mathematician. He said these cables are like the strings on a very fine violin. If they're a bit out of tune, the violin sounds lousy. He recalculated speeds and stresses. Since then, everything has gone very smooth.
With the tram in place, Freeport could lift men and equipment all the way to the mine entrance. At the tramway's base, Bechtel built mine offices and an ore processing mill. After 5 years of battling Irian Jaya, the Ertsberg mine was ready for operation at a cost of over $1 billion. But engineers had to solve another problem. How were they going to get thousands of tons of ore down the mountain? By 1972, engineers had met the challenge of building a road through Irian Jaya. Miners could begin digging the huge deposits of copper and gold discovered there. Soon, they were mining thousands of tons of ore per day. But they also faced a new challenge: how to ship that ore from Irian Jaya's faraway mountains to the rest of the world. Trucks and trams couldn't carry enough ore per day to make Ertsberg profitable. Engineers came up with a simple solution to moving the ore. Let it fall. Newly mined ore begins its journey to the world through a series of ore passes. These giant chutes send it plummeting 2,000 feet to the base of the tram. As the ore hits the ground, it breaks into smaller pieces, making it easier to move. Conveyor belts rush the fallen ore to a mill. Inside the mill, it pours into the world's largest ore crushers, some nearly 40 feet in diameter. Whirling inside these enormous drums, thousands of steel balls attack the ore, grinding it into smaller rocks. and finally into a powder. At the mill, workers mix powdered ore with water to create a concentrated liquid slurry of copper and gold. But this concentrate is still 10,000 feet high and 70 miles from the sea. Gravity gets it there. Mill workers pump the concentrate into a pipeline running beside the road. After 20 miles, the descent becomes so steep that gravity alone carries the concentrate another 50 miles to the sea. Piled in barns by the ocean, awaiting shipment to smelters around the world. The product of hundreds of millions of dollars and years of hazardous work looks like nothing but a huge pile of dirt. But in fact, it's pay dirt. When it's smelted, each ton yields nearly 700 pounds of copper, 30 grams of gold, and another 30 grams of silver.
We mine the ore at 14,000 feet and we sell it at sea level. And that's a 75-mile distance between those two. Nobody else does that.
In December 1972, the first ship loaded with ore from the Ertsberg mine sailed from Irian Jaya. By the 1980s, Ertsberg was a huge open-pit mine. The ancient glacial meadow sketched by Jean-Jacques Dozy echoed with the sounds of one of the world's most ambitious mining operations. But Freeport knew that big as it was, Ertsberg wouldn't last forever. The company sent geologists deep into the surrounding mountains to search for an even bigger body of ore, a mother lode that would make mining in Irian Jaya profitable long after Ertsberg had played out. By the 1980s, the Ertsberg open-pit mine was no longer profitable and was shut down. But by then, Frank and Eleanor Nelson and other geologists had discovered huge underground copper deposits nearby. It was a rich find, but it wasn't the mother lode Freeport had been searching for. In fact, in the mid-1980s, Freeport almost quit mining in Irian Jaya as a new technology threatened to destroy the world demand for copper. Fiber optic cable was revolutionizing world telephone systems. Many believed it would soon make copper telephone wire obsolete. But in 1984, a new chief executive took over at Freeport. James Robert Moffett was a field geologist who'd spent years exploring for oil and minerals. He wasn't ready to give up on Irian Jaya. He believed in the mother lode.
I looked at New Guinea and saw Papua New Guinea with hundreds of mines that had been explored over the last 150 years, and Irian Jaya with basically the small Ertsberg mine. And it's what we call state line geology. It happens all the time. Just because this terrain was so horrible in terms of trying to explore it, and people quit at the Papua New Guinea border, and they began to tell themselves that this state line really was some sort of a geologic boundary. Well, that's ridiculous. Geology doesn't know political boundaries, and it never has and it never will.
Moffett was convinced there was more gold in Irian Jaya's primeval hills. He told his geologists to find it. As it happened, a Freeport geologist in Irian Jaya had been thinking about gold and staring at a mountain called Grasberg, less than 2 miles from the Ertsberg mine.
Every morning I'd look up and I'd see the outcrop, I'd see that mountain sitting up there, and I'd think to myself, gee, there really should be something up there. It literally drove me nuts to stand down at the bottom of that mountain and look up at it and know that there was a rock up there that I hadn't been on. And that was an itch that I just had to scratch. And after about 2 years, we finally got a chance to do it.
The rocks Dave Potter collected on Grasberg assayed at 1 to 2 grams of gold per ton. It was enough to justify further investigation. Potter set up diamond drills and took core samples.
The first one came back, which was an angle hole that went directly under the outcrop, and not only did it have gold in it, it also had copper values. And for the first time, I started thinking to myself, there's something more here than just a gold deposit. The one that really drove it home was the last hole that we drilled. It went over about 1,500 feet deep. And out of that 1,500 feet, all of it but about 90 to 100 feet came back with copper values that were ore grade. In other words, they were on the order of 1 to 2% copper, on the order of 1 to as high as 5 grams per ton gold. That hole was when I suddenly felt, my God, this is big.
Big was an understatement. Grasberg made mining history. Dave Potter's hunch led Freeport to 1 billion tons of ore, the biggest gold deposit and the 3rd biggest copper deposit ever found.
Give Mr. Moffett the credit for maintaining the property when he could have taken probably $75 million for it in the early 80s and walked away clean. You know, now Grasberg itself in the ground is worth over $40 billion. 75 million, 40 billion, good choice.
But as the first euphoria faded, a sobering realization took over. A wall of cliffs blocked the Ertsberg road from reaching the Grasberg. To mine its bonanza, Freeport would have to haul the world's biggest trucks and shovels up Irian Jaya's nearly vertical cliffs to a mountain even more remote than Ertsberg. At Ertsberg, engineers had achieved the incredibly difficult. Now, at Grasberg, they faced the impossible. Grasberg is the world's richest gold mine. It's also one of the most productive and cost-efficient. Working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, its miners dig 600,000 tons of ore in a single day. To dig this staggering amount of ore, they must use the world's biggest mining equipment. Gigantic Bucyrus electric shovels, picking up 80 tons of ore in a single scoop. And the Komatsu 930, the leviathan of ore trucks, carrying over 300 tons in a single load. Other mines use this colossal equipment, but none has faced the task of transporting it up sheer cliffs in a remote and primitive land to a mountain peak nearly 14,000 feet high. In the 1980s, this seemed impossible. The Ertsberg tramway can carry only 15 tons. A single Komatsu ore truck weighs over 200 tons. Towering cliffs blocked the Ertsberg road from reaching the Grasberg site. In the late 1980s, the Grasberg miners faced this daunting challenge and won. This is the Heat Road. HEAT stands for Heavy Equipment Access Trail. The Heat Road is unlike any other highway ever built.
The Heat Road begins at an elevation of about 8,000 feet and traverses up the mountainside for about 7 miles and comes out at about 13,500 feet. Some of the grades are in excess of 22 to 30%.
Branching off from the main road just below the Grasberg, the Heat Road zigzags straight uphill into the clouds until it reaches the mine, Freeport's stairway to heaven. They hadn't counted on Freeport's veteran road builder, Ilyas Hamid.
Freeport asked several independent contractors from Australia to give them an estimate as to what it would cost to build a road. And the estimates came in dozens and dozens of millions of dollars. He heard about these incredible estimates and he thought to himself, this is crazy. I can do this for a lot less money than what these people are asking. So his expat supervisor agreed to let him try.
First, my boss took me to see the situation from the helicopter. I told him I needed a bulldozer, mechanics, and fuel. My boss said, "Okay, Ilyas, I give you everything you need."
So the guy just drove his bulldozer from the top to the bottom. It took him a while, he didn't do it overnight, but he just zigzagged back and forth.
It was the hardest work I have ever done. The bulldozer was always in danger of falling because the ground was very slippery and had very little soil on top, so the challenge was very big.
When you drive a bulldozer on a slope as steep as the slope going up to Grasberg, you can go over any time. He almost did several times. His nerve endings are so much better than ours in sensing that fine line between toppling over in your bulldozer and dying and being able to make that cut on which other people can follow behind you. That road was built for under $2 million. Incredible, just because of one guy who had whatever it took, brave enough, to go and drive his bulldozer from the top to the bottom.
He's kind of a mellow guy, but inside I think he's a tiger, and he loves the challenge. And he made something amazing happen. He maybe doesn't know much about the world of physics. Maybe he just says, you want a road from A to B and I'll get you there.
Like many Grasberg employees, Alexander Kramsian is an indigenous Irianese. His truck driving skills are even more impressive than they seem.
Jadi sebelumnya saya
I had never operated a vehicle before. The company tested me when I came. On the first day of training, I was a little confused, but I did not find it difficult after that.
20% of my people are local Irian people who have never seen a Toyota before or a car, and they come up and they're driving 300-ton haul trucks. That's a challenge in itself. And we're pretty proud of our workforce, and I've worked at numerous mines, and I'd put my people up against any other mines in the world.
Grasberg's miners won't be stopping work anytime soon. Geologists believe the deposit is even bigger than originally estimated and may still contain billions of tons of ore. But Freeport has not given up its quest for new bonanzas of copper and gold. The search has sent geologists on death-defying explorations. Today, the Grasberg mine remains the biggest gold deposit ever found. Freeport geologists continue their search for an even bigger one. Today's scientists have tools unimagined by the explorers of the past. They pore over magnetic imagery and high-resolution satellite photography, zeroing in on potential ore bodies they call hotspots, without leaving the comfort and safety of their lab. But someone's got to evaluate those hotspots. And the only way to do that is the old-fashioned way. Jay Pennington's morning commute is a little different from most.
We just pop out of the helicopter basically 2 at a time with a sampling pack and a survival pack. And then we're 1 at a time down the hoist, say from 100, 120 feet, so like a 12-story building. The first time I was lowered out of a helicopter, it was extremely invigorating, and It was scary and it was fun all at the same time. You got to have ultimate faith in your pilot, the hoist master, who's going to have your life on the line there for about 90 seconds, and then the people that maintain the equipment, both the hoist and the helicopter. So you get through that, and let's face it, you can't do the work without that confidence. As soon as you have that, the rest of it can be as fun as you want.
Exploration geologists like Jay Pennington are the front line of Freeport's search for the next Grasberg.
That's good stuff.
Despite all the high-tech science that leads him to a hotspot, Jay works with tools any California 49er would recognize. 8 hours a day, he pans for gold like an Old West prospector in some of the last true wilderness on Earth.
A lot of the times when you hit the ground, you got to feel that no Westerner, no non-native has ever been where you are at that moment right there. So you have the potential to stumble over a 50-ounce nugget of gold, and just as easily as you can step on a rare poisonous snake.
I think the men who built this mine, I think, are really an unusual bunch from the standpoint that not only were they hard workers, you can find hard workers almost anywhere in the world. I think it was a vision that they had, which I think was inspired by the kind of terrain they were working in. No place has a physical toughness and splendor that Irian has. It was really a challenge. Man against nature, but nature at her most unforgiving, nature at her toughest. I don't think you can find any place on Earth where nature is any tougher than this.
Grasberg and Ertsberg will forever remain monuments to those who discovered them, built them, and made them work. A tribute to the human courage and determination that, against stupendous odds, erected a superstructure above the clouds at the ends of the earth.